QSO Today, episode 364, Rene Lutz HB9NBG. My thanks to ICOM America for sponsoring the QSO Today podcast. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth, amateur call sign 4Z1UG, where I demonstrate the diversity and relevance of the amateur radio hobby and its impact on society by interviewing the ham radio operators, many of whom played vital roles in shaping our technology through the amateur radio hobby. And while many people might say, ham radio, do people still do that? This podcast demonstrates through in-depth interviews just how amazing, diverse, and dynamic the amateur radio hobby continues to be. The QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo, from the comments of the many visitors who wrote to me, was a success. My thanks to the amazing presenters, over 100 of them, who featured that circus midway that is now ham radio that I always talk about. I admit that we had a few botches that we quickly tried to correct, but as this machine that is the expo is extremely complicated, I hope that the people affected will forgive me and my team. I appreciate the QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo with its emphasis on virtual is not for everyone, as it was pointed out to me in just a few personal email messages. However, the positive responses far outweigh the negative. We will be back with the expo on March 13th, 2022. If you came, thanks for coming. The expo and its content is still on demand until September 13th. SOTA Operator Rene Lutz HB9NBG has the European Alps as his challenge to conquer every summit with his partner Carine, HB9FZC. Together, they operate their successful rural Swiss ham radio sales and service center that attracts ham radio tourists. Rene and Carine document their amateur radio ventures on their popular YouTube channel. HB9NBG is my QSO Today. HB9NBG, this is Eric 4Z1UG. Are you there, Rene?
Yeah, Roger. Hello, Eric. 401 Uniform Golf. This is HB9 November Bravo Golf returning. Very good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Rene. How are you? It's a beautiful day in Israel, and you tell me what kind of weather is going on there in Switzerland?
Yeah, we are fine. I'm fine. My wife Carine is fine, but the weather isn't fine here. We have and had a lot of rain the last few days. Really rainy here in Switzerland. It's cold. We have only 14 degrees, and it's about the same weather since a few weeks. We can hardly wait for the real summer now, Eric. QSO?
Yes, I agree with you. We have the real summer here in Israel, which thankfully we all enjoy the heat. Maybe some people like it less than others, but for the most part, we're used to it. Anyway, Rene, let's start at the very beginning of your ham radio story. When and how did it start for you?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. It's really a long time ago. I covered a CB radio by a friend of my parents when I was about 12 years old. That's nearly 40 years ago. And it was absolutely awesome for me to hear people on the radio that I never saw before. I was absolutely thrilled about the communication over radio, and so my father supported me to install my first CB antenna on the roof of my of our house. That was the start of for me in the radio world. It's long time ago. And it was really something mysterious for me from the very first moment. And so after 4 years of making CB radio, I decided to make my ham license. And it was the same time as when I was started my education as electronics technician. And then I was 16 years old. And because of the education, which has started at the same time, I didn't have any time to learn the CW. This time when I was started, and so I was very, very active with the 2-meter DXing with a lot of different different kinds of 2-meter DXing, like Troppo and the sporadic. And very impressional was Aurora QSO. I can remember I had one Aurora QSO on 2-meter in SSB. And that's, I think it's a little bit unique.
Let's go back a little bit, okay? Because I think that the majority of our listeners to the QSO Today podcast are in the United States. And the education system in America is quite different, I think, than the European education system. You said that at age 16, you were on a track for electronic technology. Most 16-year-olds are in high school, chasing girls, doing sports, and trying to get through their general education requirement for their high school diploma before they make that choice for a career. How is that different from what happens in Switzerland, for example, where at age 16, it seems to me you've had to make a choice?
Yeah, it's in Switzerland, the education is that you have, when you are 7 years old, you start with the school in Switzerland. That's the official national school. And then you go to the school till you are 16. And with 16, you have to choose. You have to choose if you want to go to the gymnasium. It calls gymnasium. I don't know if you know that word. You have to choose if you want to go, if you want to continue a school, or if you want to go to a profession. When you are 16 years old in Switzerland, and for me, I was already in the national school. Things like physics or chemistry and chemistry, I think, were really very, very, very interesting for me, and so. I wanted to learn the profession of consumer electronic technician. I wanted to found my own enterprise as early as possible, and so I started my education as an electronics technician. And then it's a binary system. One part of it is going to school for 4 years, 2 days a week. You have to go to the school, and the other 3 days you have to work in an enterprise. Where you make repairs of electronics, and you are learning by doing. And after these 4 years, I had my examination, and I finished it successfully. And then when I was 20 years old, I was an electronic technician for consumer electronics.
We interviewed Andreas Spiess, HB9BLA, a few weeks ago. He also said that Swiss also have mandatory military service. Did you also have mandatory military service that was involved in this whole educational process?
No, because my problem was that I cannot see good enough with my left eye. And because of that, I couldn't make any military. It was not a problem for me. It wouldn't be a problem if I had to go to the military. But like this, I could make my. There was no break in my way to be an owner of my own enterprise. So I made my education. And when I was 20 years old, I founded my own enterprise with consumer electronics. It's a long time ago. It's 27 years ago now. And I was active in consumer electronics for 25 years with the repairs, with the installation of antenna systems, of satellite reception systems. We had a shop, we had a showroom with the televisions and high-end hi-fi systems. And yes, well, it was a very interesting time, but the problem was that you couldn't make repairs. It wasn't possible to repair consumer electronic equipment.
Because the way it was manufactured, it's like designed for throwing away after a number of years?
Yeah, that was the problem. And because I am very, very still very interesting in repairing components and in electronic components. And so I decided to make a change in our enterprise so that I can repair again. And we've made this change 7 years ago now into the amateur radio business. And now I'm repairing amateur radio equipment now with the knowledge which I've learned in my profession of consumer electronics.
This might be a question that you may not have an answer to. There's a move afoot with national legislation in North America called the Right to Repair movement, because there's a large number of consumers and electronic professionals who are in the repair business who are saying that many of the companies that produce electronic devices no longer make parts and manuals available for repair, and that essentially this planned obsolescence of electronic devices that we use for 5 years and then we throw them into a landfill is bad for the environment, but also people want to repair these things. Do you have a right to repair movement in Switzerland in order to get back the ability to repair electronic gear, consumer electronic gear?
I do not repair consumer electronics anymore since 5 years now. But we when we was active in this business, we chose the brands which we wanted to sell. So that we had a support. We had still support. So we had plans, we had schematics, we had a beautiful support. And we only sold consumer electronics products which we could repair ourselves as well. And it was no longer available, components like this. And so when we was changed to the amateur radio business, there is one brand who has the same philosophy as we have, and that's Elecraft. And there are schematics available. There is an absolutely awesome support. And so we have the opportunity to repair this devices ourselves. But in consumer electronics, you don't have any chance to get support, to get the schematics. So it's no longer possible, at least in Switzerland, to make repairs like this.
Right. It's too bad. I also feel it here as well. We tend to be a throwaway economy rather than trying to keep stuff working. On the one hand. On the other hand, it's good for people like me that when I'm walking the dogs, I can find pretty decent stuff that's in the trash bin that might just need a new switch or cord or something like that, and I've got a pretty nice old vacuum or something like that. So on the one hand, people aren't fixing things. On the other hand, they're throwing stuff that's pretty good, and if you know how to fix things, then you actually have some pretty good stuff. So you got your first license at age 16, and you said that you weren't very good at CW. So there's a number of different license classes in Switzerland. And what was the first license class that you took at age 16 in order to operate on 2 meters?
That's I don't exactly remember how it was called, this license class. It's about the same as we have today, the Class A. Today we have 2 classes. It's Class A, Class 1, and it's Class E, Class Echo. It's Class 2. And when I've made my license, there was the technic stuff was the same for all classes, and the difference was only the CW. And today there are two different classes. An easy way to enter in the amateur radio, and these call signs are HB3 call signs. For people who has the basic license, it's an these are HB3 call signs, and but you cannot use each band. You can only use the 80-meter band, the 160-meter band, the 10 and the 15, and also 2-meter and 70 centimeter, when you have only the HB3 license. And when I was 16 years old, I could only use 2-meter and above. There were no restrictions, and also no restrictions about the power. And today the restriction are the bands, and the restrictions is also the power with the new basic license. But when I was 16 years old, the only thing was I couldn't make any shortwave communication.
And now this message from ICOM America. ICOM has the base station of your dreams with the IC7851, the IC7610, the IC9700, and the IC7300 SDR transceivers. ICOM's transceivers are top of the line and are the first choice of contesters across the globe. Robust base stations like these cut through the pileups, letting you work the bands and record those contacts. Keep up your competitive contesting edge with ICOM. You've heard it, worked it, logged it. The ICOM IC7851 gives you a new window into the RF world, and with faster processors, high input gain, high display resolution, and a cleaner signal, it is truly the pinnacle of HF perfection. It includes dual receivers, digital IF filters, memory keyer, digital voice recorder, high-resolution spectrum waterfall display, enhanced PC connectivity, and an SD memory card slot. The IC7610 is the SDR wanted by every ham. This high-performance SDR can pick out the faintest of signals even in the presence of stronger adjacent signals. The ICOM IC7610 is a direct sampling software-defined radio that will change the world's definition of an SDR transceiver. RF Direct Sampling System, 110 dB RMDR, independent dual receiver, dual digicell. Create your own band opening with the ICOM IC9700. This transceiver brings you direct sampling to the UHF-VHF weak signal world. This all-mode transceiver is loaded with innovative features that are sure to keep you busy. Faster processors, higher input gain, higher display resolution, and a cleaner signal. It has a 4.3-inch touchscreen color TFT LCD, real-time high-speed spectrum scope and waterfall display, smooth satellite operation with 99 satellite channels, dual watch operation, and full duplex in satellite mode. The IC7300 changed the way that entry-level HF is designed. This high-performance innovative HF transceiver has a compact design that will far exceed your expectations. Again, it has RF direct sampling, 15 discrete bandpass filters, large 4.3-inch color touchscreen, real-time spectrum scope, and an SD memory card slot. Go to icomamerica.com/amateur to find the ICOM dealer nearest you. And when you buy that super ICOM rig, tell the dealer that you heard about it here on QSO Today. And now back to our QSO. When you first got your license, how did you get to amateur radio from Citizens Band Radio? Was there an amateur radio club in your area? Was there books at the library? How was it that you actually discovered ham radio in Switzerland?
There was there were two radio amateurs in our neighborhood. It was one was HB9 Sierra X-Ray Delta. That was the first radio amateur. I was in contact with him, HB9SXD, and there was also HB9 Mike Kilo Victor. These two guys are still active today. A little bit older than I am, of course. But these were the first people. There was a club in Basel. Basel is about 30 kilometers away from us. That's the city of Basel. But I was never I was never a participant of this club. 30 years ago, I learned all of my amateur radio knowledge on air by myself with the support of these two guys. That was my way for starting in amateur radio.
Okay, so you've kind of brought us up almost up to date in terms of what you did professionally. You graduated. I'm very impressed that you became an entrepreneur at 20 years of age and started your own company. Was the name of your first company also Lutz Electronics?
Yeah, it was the same. It was the same name. Yeah, it was the same name always. I was starting with Lutz Electronics, it's still Lutz Electronics. Yes.
And the village you're in, Grindel. Were you always in Grindel? Was that the hometown?
Yeah. My parents, my father has gone, unfortunately, 20 years ago already. But my mother lives still here in Grindel, and also I have two sisters and one brother, and two of these three are living still in Grindel. Usually, when you grow up in Grindel, then you will stay in Grindel your whole life long.
I saw pictures of your home on your QRZ page, and you have a dining room table that looks like it holds 14. So that explains why your dining room table has so many chairs. You have the family around you.
I live together with my wife Carine here. Her call sign, by the way, is HB9 Foxtrot Zulu Charlie. We are operating our business ourselves. I am operating it with Carine together, and we decided to have no children because it's a personal decision. Because you have some restrictions, and we half of a year we are living in the Swiss Alps. Every minute we spend in the Swiss Alps with the hiking and climbing and SOTA activations. And if you have children, it's not possible to go your way 100%. And that's because we live alone. But the table with much of chairs is for our workshops. We are launching amateur radio workshops here with us in our house. With the Swiss, and till now a lot of Swiss participants. We had Austrian participants, we had German participants, and so that's the table for this visitors. And our living room is our schooling room, also our education room. It's we live and we work here. It's all together with us.
So you're operating this amateur radio business from Grindel, Switzerland, which is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of somewhere. It's the beautiful Swiss Alps, but it's also a long way from everything. Have you been successful having a retail store in addition to doing repairs? And I'm assuming that you also do a fair amount of mail order. Have you been successful in creating new hams in Grindel or the surrounding areas as a result of your very visible store and ham shack?
Yeah, we are very successful in producing new hams here because every visitor who is interested by amateur radio is very welcome with us. That's a very important thing for us. So that we can show with we have a state-of-the-art equipment here. We are running the newest equipment here, like K4. That's the very newest transceiver with us, the new K4D from Elecraft, which has arrived 2 weeks ago with us. And so we can show transceivers with antennas. We have a little antenna farm around the house. We have installed about 12 antennas at the moment. So there is a beam, a Moseley beam, 10 meters off the ground on a pneumatic mast, for example. There is a vertical from high gain. There is a baby loop from Giro Mazzoni in Italy. A solution for limited spaces. There are also beam antennas for 2 meters 70 and 23 centimeters. There is a QO100 equipment which is installed here, and so we can show amateur radio really in practice. And so the visitors are very, very thrilled, absolutely thrilled about how we can communicate around the whole world with our amateur radio equipment. And that's a good thing. And we give some hints how for the education, for the amateur radio license to the people. And we have about, I think, 20 visitors every year, which visit us to have a look at the amateur radio operation. And most of this 20 to maybe 30 or 40 visitors made their own license within the next few months after visiting us. That's very nice for us as well, and I think it's a big success also for the community, and it's also for us. We are very, very delighted with this new people.
Well, I think that when the world opens up again after the pandemic is over, then hopefully hams in other places will look for an Airbnb in Grindel so they can actually come and spend some time with you and Carine and do amateur radio or maybe do SOTA activations or something like that. What I wanted to ask you, because you brought up the antennas, you mentioned the pneumatic mast. Now, pneumatic masts I think they're relatively rare. I saw one here in a surplus store in Israel, and the guy wanted $500 for it, and it looked like it was brand new. It was military, but it goes up 10 meters, and that's actually pretty good. The issue that American hams may have is they live in neighborhoods that don't allow antennas that are visible. Do you think that a pneumatic mast that could maybe raise the patio cover or something like that would be an effective way for hams to get on the air at night where it wouldn't be so visible, and it would be a solution for working in neighborhoods where you can't have visible antennas?
Yeah, I had some requests about it from American hams. Because we were in QSO and they saw the pictures on my QSO.com page. It's a simple solution. It doesn't take a lot of place. It's green. It's produced in green color. And if it is retracted, it's only 3 meters off the ground. And it's also a big advantage for installing and supporting the antenna system. You can install it by hand yourself, one person, maybe not a big opti beam, that's for sure. But the Moseley beam is only about 13 or 15 kilogram of weight. And I've installed it myself on the pneumatic mast, which was retracted to only 3 meters off the ground. And you can extract it within 5 minutes with air pressure of about 2 bars, I think so. It's extracted within 5 minutes, and it's retracted within other 5 minutes. For me, it's a very simple solution, which doesn't take a lot of space. And because of that, for me in person, it was the best solution.
When I saw the picture, I thought, well, this might be a solution for me. I haven't really tested my neighbors yet because I don't have antenna restrictions, but I do have neighbors. It looks like it could be a solution for me to keep it below the roof line until nighttime comes. I'm curious, you have a number of different antennas on your QTH, and you just mentioned them, the magnetic loop from Italy, the wire antennas, verticals, the Moseley beam. Do you actively switch between antennas in order to give yourself an idea of how they perform versus each other? And what is the surprise that you've discovered switching between these antennas in terms of some newfound knowledge?
There were some surprises. There were some surprises, really. The biggest surprise is how good the baby loop works. That was really absolutely awesome, because I've compared the Moseley beam. By the way, it's an MP33 NWARC. It's a 4-element, but there are 3 elements for 20, 15, and 10. And in addition of these 3 elements, there is a rotary dipole for 12 and 17, the MP33. And that's my favorite antenna, of course, because I can work with 1 kilowatt with that without any problems. But I've made some comparisons between this MP33 and also the high gain AV620, which is installed as well. It's a 5-band vertical antenna, which is in resonant on each band over the whole band. Really a great antenna. And I can work with it also with 1 kW without any problem. And also in the comparison was the small baby loop. And it was really a very big surprise for me that the difference between the baby loop and the Moseley beam is not really big. I've made a QSO with Whiskey Delta 8 Charlie. I think it's Ben. I'm not 100% sure about the prefix, but I think it's Whiskey Delta 8 Charlie. I've made a QSO, a test QSO with him, and I've worked with the K3S with 100 watts only, without any amp. And I switched between, I started with the Moseley in SSB, by the way, on 20 meter. I started with the Moseley and I switched to the baby loop as the second antenna. And on my first asking, is there any difference? Ben told me no difference between the Moseley and the baby loop. And I couldn't believe it. I switched back to the Moseley and back again to the baby loop. And then Ben told me, maybe 1 S-step. There is maybe 1 S-step. He told me with the Moseley, you are an S9 and a 5/9, between S9 and 5/. And with the baby loop, you have an S8 to 9. And that was really a very big surprise for me. And by the way, the baby loop had a better performance than the high gain vertical in my comparison. With the same, it's also much more quiet, the magnetic loop, than the vertical. The noise floor was, in my comparison on 20 meter, was about an S3 to 4. With the vertical, and the baby loop about an S2 to 3, and the Moseley, of course, an S1 to 2. And there is a big signal to noise ratio, a much bigger signal to noise ratio, because the signal itself was not stronger on the vertical than on the baby loop. And that was really a big surprise for me. Really a big surprise.
When we're talking about the baby loop, that's the antenna that it looks like it's made of galvanized steel.
I think it's aluminium.
But it has, instead of having a vacuum capacitor for the C portion of its LC component, it actually has like its own capacitor fins that mesh together, and it uses like the whole loop kind of squeezes in and out on itself.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a brilliant design, and it uses like a TVRO actuator arm.
Yeah.
It's amazingly clever. I think it's available in the States from like DX Engineering for people that want to know it, right?
Yeah.
It's a clever antenna, but we also like to warn people that when you're operating 100 watts into it, you don't want anybody standing too close.
Yeah, of course.
Because it has a high voltage of 5,000-6,000 volts at its voltage point. But it's a beautiful antenna. Well, that's very interesting to know because sometimes you think it has to be bigger and higher in order for it to perform. And in fact, that loop's sitting on the ground.
Yeah, it's sitting. You have to install it between 1.5 meter and 2.5 meter off the ground. Not higher, not nearby the ground, but between 1.5 and 2.5 meter. So you can tune the antenna on all frequencies between 6.6 megahertz and 29.7. You can make 40 meter to 10 meter. Each frequency you want to make with it, and it's also amazing because of the power handling. You can operate with up to 400 watts between 40 meter and 15, and you can operate with 1 kW on 12 and on 10 meter. And that's absolutely amazing. And till now, I've worked with 100 watts only, but it's unbelievable. I've worked the West Coast. I've worked, and I have to mention all in SSB till now because I'm not yet a good CW operator. I've made some CW QSOs, but not a lot. Most of my activities are in SSB. And so I've worked the West Coast, California. I've worked Hawaii one time with 100 watts. I've worked... And the biggest thing was I worked Victor Kilo 9. Victor Kilo 9, the expedition about 1.5 or 2 years ago. And this guy was calling in the expedition mode. That means I thought that I wouldn't have any chance to break the pile-up with 100 watts and the baby loop. I can remember it was a very, very, very stormy day. It was incredible stormy. And Carine and I, we had to install to take away the vertical because of it was dangerous because it was so stormy. And then I had to make a break because of the storm with the installation and revision works. And first time I saw the Victor Kilo 9 in the cluster and I thought, shit, I don't have any antenna. And now it's on the air. But then I remembered that there is also the baby loop. And I never thought that I could work the Victor Kilo 9 with the baby loop with 100 watts. But I had to call 2 times. Only 2 times with the FTDX 3000. That was the radio. FTDX 3000, 100 watts into the baby loop, and I called only 2 times, and he came back to my call on 20 meter, and I could lock him. That was really awesome.
Let me take a quick break to tell you about my favorite amateur radio audio podcast, and that's the Ham Radio Workbench podcast with George, KJ6VU, Jeremy, KF7IJZ, and it now includes Michael Walker, VA3MW, where they pursue topics, technology, and projects on their ham radio workbenches every 2 weeks. The group documents their projects and makes circuit boards available to their listeners. They have interesting guests and go in deep. Jeremy may complain about the overall length of the podcast, but friends, let me tell you that I could listen to it all day, and that's good. Even if you are a seasoned ham radio builder or just getting started, be sure to join George, Jeremy, and Mike now for the Ham Radio Workbench podcast on every podcast player. Use the link on this week's show notes page by clicking on the image. A new way to show your support of the QSO Today podcast is to buy me a coffee. I consume gallons of coffee to create this weekly podcast. Invite me for coffee by pushing the yellow button, Buy Me a Coffee, on the QSO Today show notes page. And now back to our QSO Today. That's actually very good to say. You know, for folks that are in covenant communities that don't allow antennas, a baby loop. So here's an entrepreneurial idea for anyone listening, and that is try to make what looks like an Indian dream catcher net to go over the baby loop so that anybody that looks in your yard will think that it's a work of art. Sculpture in your sculpture garden in the backyard rather than an active amateur radio antenna, and probably you won't have a problem. Let's move on to SOTA, because you happen to be in the land of mountain peaks. Your YouTube channel is full of your SOTA activations. Can you talk about how you got involved in SOTA and how many Swiss peaks you've activated and how many are left to activate?
Yeah, Carine and I, we met us the first time in 2005. And it was because of our hiking holidays. I was searching somebody who comes with me to make some hikings in the Swiss mountains. So I met Carine, my wife Carine, for the first time, and it was absolutely perfect. It was perfect from the very first moment, and so we made a lot of big hikes in the Swiss Alps, also in the Haute-Savoie. That's the northern part of the French, and it's on the border. We've made a tour. It calls Mont Blanc Tour. Mont Blanc, maybe you know, it's the highest peak in Europe. It was a trekking tour over 8 days. But this time we didn't know SOTA. But of course I had my license. We only had a handheld with us. And so we've made a lot of hiking tours over the next about 8 or 9 years. All of the very famous hiking tours. And in 2014, we heard another OM calling on the 2-meter band CQ SOTA. And we didn't know what means SOTA. And of course, I asked him, what is SOTA? And he was explaining us a little bit about this operation mode, and it was clear for us from the very first moment that's our preferred mode in the future. So we started our first SOTAs in 2014, end of 2014, with the handheld. And on 2 meter, and it was nice. It was nice. It was not awesome. It was nice. But with through SOTA, we learned a lot about tour planning, and there were some SOTA portals like SOTA Data, SOTA Maps, and SOTA Watch, and something like this. And we were beginning to plan our tours, which should lead us over SOTA peaks. From 2015, we've started with the planning of the hiking tours, and the goal was to make at least one activation on each hiking tour. And that was absolutely, it was a new experience, an absolutely great new experience, because you will find new places that nobody knows. Only the SOTA operators knows these places. And that were our first steps in SOTA. And in our first SOTA year, 2016, I think we've activated about 20 or 30 summits, I think so. And on one of our biggest summer trekking tours, we've made per accident. It was not planned. We could make also first activation. And I have to mention, it's not easy to make a first activation in Switzerland, because there are a lot of active SOTA activators, and they were active since 2005. And the easy summits all are activated already. And if you are searching for a new first activation, it's in each case, it's a big hike, a difficult hike. And that is really challenging for us. And that's what is very interesting for us. In 2018, we had a great SOTA year. We've activated 100 summits in 2018. And all of the summits, nearly all, were really in the high Alps. That means between 2,500 and 3,300 meters above sea level. And the last few summers, we in each summer we have a vacation of 6 weeks. That's absolutely awesome. And then our goal is to activate as much as SOTA summits as possible. So we've activated last summer, within 30 days, we've activated 36 summits. All in the Swiss Alps. 10 of these 36 were above 3,000 meters. And 10 of all of these were first activations. And all in all, we've activated in the meantime, I think, about 220, 230 uniques. Uniques means we've activated it only one time. And we've activations, all of our activations counts about 420, 430 activations the last 5 or 6 years.
Now, can I ask you, you said that you do tours. Does a tour mean that you're actually going with a larger group of hikers?
No. That's a problem. That is a problem for us because we decide maybe, for example, we have a look at the forecast this evening. That will be in our vacation, which will start next Saturday. That means tomorrow. And so we have a look today afternoon to the forecast. Then we can see, for example, the canton of Wallis. That's the big mountain canton in the southwestern Switzerland. And when we will see the WX will be good for the next 3 or 4 or 5 days in this area, we decide just at the time. So tomorrow we will start an activity in the canton of Wallis. Then I will search for a summit for the first day. And I do it. Usually, I do it in the portal of SOTA. It's spelled. It's Sierra Oscar Tango Lima Alpha Sierra. SOTA. That's really the perfect SOTA portal. That is HB9 Delta Quebec Mexico who has made it. It's a great thing because you have also information about hiking tours and areas and huts and something like this. And we start for we only know what we will do the next day. And then when we finished the first activation, we enjoy our first cool beer. That's very important part of this SOTA activation. And then we are thinking about the next day. And so it's not possible to make these tours with a larger group of people. And by the way, we are hiking every day between 6 and 9 hours a day.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, between 15 and 25 kilometers. And often we made an elevation of ascent of about 2,000 meters. And that's really a lot. And so you cannot take a lot of people with you.
That's about like 6,000 feet for people that aren't in meters.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question. What do you carry? Now that you're experienced hikers and SOTA activators probably wait, given the amount of time that or the amount of kilometers that you're traveling and the elevations, what's in your SOTA bag?
Yeah, it's a very lightweight SOTA package. It's for us. It's the only way to make SOTA seriously. We use the KX2 since 2016 from Elecraft. Before, for our very first activations, we've used the FT817ND. But there was really some problems because, first of all, there is no tuner, and you need a tuner in the environment on the Alps. You need a tuner so that you are flexible, choosing your antenna system. And so with the FT817, we were not really successful, and it was not a lot of fun. And since we used the KX2, it's really a big fun because the whole SOTA equipment is only 1.5 kilogram. It's nothing. It's the KX2. There is a tuner integrated. You have a battery pack. Our battery pack is 3,400 milliamperes. It's a big battery pack. You have 10 watts of power, and we mostly use the telescopic antenna only. The AX1 from Elecraft with the extension coil AXE1. So we can be QRV from 40, 30, 20, 17, 15. And you can be QRV also on very, very, very small summits. When you are QRV on a summit on 3,500 meters above sea level, you don't have a lot of space mostly. And so you can hold it like a handheld. And we use the KX2 as a handheld. And you can believe it or not. But with this equipment, we've worked, among others, Zulu Lima 1 Bravo Yankee Zulu from the middle of the Swiss Alps. We've worked him in SSB on 20 meters in Auckland with this telescopic antenna. And so you have minimum of effort and maximum of fun. It's and also success. It's our own SOTA equipment is only 1.5 kilogram weight.
Now, are you out on the trail for multiple days? Meaning that, do you carry also some kind of solar panel or something like that to keep your battery charged?
No, you can, according to our experiences, you can work about 150 to 200 SSB SOTA QSOs with one battery charge. So we have one spare battery with us, so that if we spend the night in a hut with maybe 70 other people, you don't have a lot of power there for charging the batteries. And with this spare battery, one battery plus one spare battery, you can work maybe about 12 summits activations with this two battery without any charging between of the different activations. So we don't have any solar panels and something like that with us.
Now, are you spotting, meaning are you using some other like social media or your cell phones or anything like that to let people know that you're on the summit and that they should call you? And how does that work? Do you actually have coverage, cellular phone coverage or something like that up there on the trail?
Yeah, you have to spot. That's incredible thing. That's very important. Incredible important that you spot your activation, because if you don't spot, mostly you have problems to make only these 4 QSOs you need. Because of that, you have to spot. We use a special app. It calls OutD Lock. It's spelled like Oscar Uniform Tango, yes, Oscar Uniform Tango, Delta, Lima Oscar Golf, OutD Lock. It's an app from a Swiss radio amateur, HB9 Golf Victor Charlie has created it. It's a great app. You can spot with this app, and you also can lock with this app. And that's a good thing. So you can, after the activation, you can export your file to your email, and then you only have to load up the file to the SOTA database, and the activation is done. And that's really a big advantage. And the spotting with this app, of course, is only working if you have coverage of cellular phone. Because of that, we have also on each of our activations, we have also our FT3 from Yaesu with us with the APRS functionality. And it's from time to time you don't have any smartphone coverage also in the middle of the Swiss Alps, also when you are nearly 4,000 meters above sea level. But with the APRS, you can spot very easy. There is a gateway from UK ham. I don't remember. His name is Stuart. I think it's Golf Zero, Golf Lima Sierra. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's Golf Zero, Golf Lima Sierra. His name is Stuart, and he operates a gateway. So you have to send him an email and ask him to use APRS to SOTA with your call sign, and you have to give him your call sign, and then the gateway is active.
His gateway is in the UK?
Yeah.
You're hitting his gateway from the Swiss Alps to the UK?
No, over APRS.
So there are APRS nodes around Switzerland that are picking up your signal?
Yeah, not only around Switzerland, that's over the whole world. You use APRS, you send a message, it's the syntax is defined. It's very simple syntax. It includes your call sign, it includes the summit reference, and it includes the mode and the frequency, of course, and a remark. We usually spot QRV now. And then you send it over APRS, and there is, as you told before, there is a gateway, and your spot will find the way to SOTA Watch. You can spot with APRS, and within about 20 seconds, your spot comes up in SOTA Watch. And that works independent of any internet connection on the summit.
So, Rene, when you're, say, off the grid, meaning that you're in the deepest canyons of the Swiss Alps on your hike, do you rely only on amateur radio then if you had to have emergency communications, or do you carry a satellite communicator with you just in case?
No, relay, that works. The repeaters are working. We have many repeaters in Switzerland. I think we have a few hundred of repeaters in whole Switzerland. Nearly each person operates a repeater. Not each person, because you have to be a club that you have the opportunity to operate a repeater. But there are really a lot of repeaters. And it's very interesting that there is, I think it's the same in the US and over the whole world. There is not a lot of traffic on these repeaters. Really, there is nearly zero traffic. But there are always a lot of people listening to these repeaters. And if we would have any emergency case, and we could reach something like the Riga, that's the Swiss emergency with the helicopters. It calls Riga, Romeo Echo Golf Alpha. And if you don't have access to this people, you can, I'm sure that you could place an emergency call over a repeater. I think there would be somebody who would hear you and make a connection to the police or to something.
So from your extensive experience then hiking the Swiss Alps, amateur radio would cover your emergency communication needs, both on HF and on your dual band handhelds.
Yeah, I think that's no problem. We had one emergency, but Carine made an accident, and it was not so nice to see for me, because she was blooding. I think that's the word. Really,
she was bleeding, right?
Heavy, but she could descend herself, and then we were driving to the hospital. And there were no problem at all. And next day we've done the next summit, so it was not a big problem for us till now. But I think if we would have a problem, we could make an emergency call with our handheld over a repeater, I think.
Do you activate mountains in other countries?
But not very often. Only very few. We've activated when we are on a trekking tour around the borders to Italy or to French, or to Liechtenstein or to Austria. Then we had also activated some peaks. But I think last year we've activated one summit in Italy. And that was a first activation, a really big hike. I think that was the reason, because it was a first activation. We had to hike 28 kilometers. That was a big tour, and I think it was not so much elevation, about 14 or 1,500 meters of elevation. 4,000 to 5,000 feet of elevation. It's not a lot for us, but it was a long way to go. And I think there are really not a lot of radio amateurs who are really sportive. That is, most of radio amateurs drives with the car as near as possible to the summit and hikes maybe 30 minutes to the summit. And our goal, the goal of Carine and me, is to hike as much as we can and to reach a very unknown summit. And that's real fun. That's a big experience. I think it's a big difference between Carine and me and a lot of other SOTA operators in Switzerland and Europe. There are other SOTA operators. So also in Switzerland, there are some guys who has activated also the highest point in Switzerland, 4,634 meters. They has also the Matterhorn. A lot of people around the world knows the Matterhorn. They has also activated the Matterhorn. But there are only, I think, maybe a dozen of Swiss radio amateurs who are really good and sportive hikers, I think so.
What is the Mount Everest Award? I saw that on your QRZ page.
Yeah, it's not what you think.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
It's very easy to reach. It's very easy. You know, the Mount Everest is 8,848 meters high, and if you make an ascent and a descent after you've made 17,696, I think so, meter. One time up, one time down, and so if you add all of the elevations of the mountains which you activate during 12 months, and all of this added elevations are over this 17,969 meters, you've reached the Mount Everest Award. That means if you activate, for example, if you activate 9 summits which are above 2,000 meters high within 12 months, then you've reached the Mount Everest Award. It's not a big problem to.
You didn't have to go to Nepal in order to get the Mount Everest Award.
No.
Okay, that's good to know. I saw that you're operating the Qatar Telecom QO100 satellite from your house, and you also provide components for getting on the satellite. What do you like to operate on the satellite, and what's the most interesting contact that you've made on QO100?
For me, it's of course, it's a repeater 36,000 meters away from us. It's a linear transponder. You have the narrowband transponder. You have a bandwidth of about I think 500 kilohertz. That's interesting. I use it as a telephone. It's interesting to talk to people independent of conditions. That is interesting that you can meet people whenever you want to meet them and talk to them. Unfortunately, not in Northern America, but I've made some QSOs to Papa Yankee already. I've made some QSOs to the Maldives.
So we're talking like Brazil to India almost, right?
Yeah, Brazil to India. I've made a contact. That was nice. I've made a contact to Zulu Sierra 6 something, a guy in Southern Africa. And then, as you hear, my English is not really good. It's a little bit. It's not so easy for me to talk in English, but I try to give my best. And so I made it the same way on this QSO with the guy in Southern Africa. Then he told me, you can try in German, no problem. Then I switched it to High German. It's not my mother language. It's a native Swiss German. It's not High German. It's a little bit the same for people in Bavaria. In Bavaria, they can understand us mostly. But then I switched to High German. And then this guy told me, oh, you can switch to Swiss German, no problem at all. And that was a surprise because he told me that he is living in Switzerland 9 months in the year and 3 months over the year he lives. At this moment, he lived in Southern Africa, and he works for the government. I don't know the word. He's representing Switzerland in another country. I think you know what I mean.
He's an ambassador.
Yeah, Roger. Yeah.
He works for the Foreign Service.
Yeah, for the Foreign Service. Yeah, that was interesting. That was nice to talk to him. And I don't use it often because the feeling of amateur radio for me in person, that's shortwave communication.
The ionosphere. You like the unpredictability of the ionosphere.
Yeah. But that's because I'm using it not often, but it's interesting till it's installed. Because you are working with frequencies on 10 gigahertz in the downlink and with the frequencies on 2.4 gigahertz in the uplink. That's interesting to work with these frequencies, with this equipment. And it's I'm QRV at the moment, but it's quiet. You can use the squelch also in SSB, and we have a frequency. Who a lot of Swiss people and also Swiss people around the world are communicating with each other. And this frequency, I am QRV the whole day long on this frequency, and the squelch is turned on a little bit. And if somebody calls me, I can answer to him. That's interesting for me, but it's not for me. Is this kind of amateur radio is not for me in person, not the real amateur radio feeling. I've made some Oscar 13 QSOs in the early 1990s. That was another thing. That was very interesting with the high ecliptical orbit because you had to track with the antennas. And that was very, very interesting. I was very active. It was in my very early time of amateur radio, 1992 or 3, I think it was. That was real amateur radio. according to my opinion. And the Q100 is very interesting to communicate, to talk to each other, but it's I think you know what I mean.
I think I do. From your perspective, what do you think the greatest challenge facing amateur radio is now?
I think people can spend their time with a lot of other things today. There are a lot of possibilities to spend the free time, and because of that, we have to be. I don't know it's the right word, to be offensive, to go out, to show people what is amateur radio. I think that's the most important thing. We don't have to do it for ourselves in our shack, and nobody let know that we are doing amateur radio. That's a little bit difficult. We have to make it public. And because I think that's my experience. The people in the world are very interested also today in amateur radio, but not a lot of people knows that amateur radio exists. I had some interviews in the National Swiss Radio, also in the Swiss television in the last few years. And it was interesting. For example, last New Year's Eve, I thought it would be nice to talk to a guy in Australia when this guy is already in 2021 and I am still in 2020, and I've made it. It worked. And then Carine told me, you have to make an email to the Swiss National Radio and talk about this experience. And I've made an email. Hi, guys. The title of the email was Contact in the Future over Amateur Radio. And it took 3 minutes, and then my telephone was ringing. Okay, hello, here is Swiss Radio, the National Swiss Radio. Could you talk about amateur radio for about 5 minutes? Of course I can. And I've made it, and we've received a lot of feedbacks after that. So I think the challenge is to make it public. And if we take the chance and make amateur radio public, there are a lot of people who are interested also today still in amateur radio. And then we will have no problems in the future to that amateur radio will be interesting also for the next generation. We have a lot of young people who are visiting us, really young. That means between 20 and 30 years old. And they are absolutely thrilled about this kind of communication because they know only their smartphone. And if we show them a QSO with maybe Alaska on shortwave and tell them, as you see, there is an antenna, there is a transceiver, and there is maybe a battery under the desk. That's all. And we can communicate also in an emergency case. Then that is interesting for people. And my recommendation is cry it out. We are here. Amateur radio lives still. And I think that when we all do that, we will not have any problems that amateur radio will live also in 20 years.
Do you have advice for new or returning hams to the hobby?
The best way to enter in the hobby is trying all. And it's once again my personal opinion. We advise also all of the visitors with us, forget the basic license. Forget it. According to my opinion, it's much more interesting to make the real Class R license, because when then only like this you have the knowledge how the technique stuff works. And so first of all, make the big license so you can use all of the bands, you can use all of the modes, and you can use in Switzerland 1 kW of power, I think in the USA 1.5, I'm not 100% sure, I think. And if you have reached the big license, you know how the devices are playing. You know how electronic components are working, and that is interesting. And otherwise, it's maybe you will be active on the repeaters and things like this for maybe 2 months or so, and over the 2 months you meet the same 5 people, and then it's over. It's no interest in the hobby if you don't have the opportunity to use all of the bands, all of the modes, big equipment. So that's my advice. If you are interested to be an amateur radio, to become an amateur radio, then you have to learn, make the big license, and then you will have a lot of fun in the hobby.
Well, that sounds like great advice. I just want to remind the listeners that Rene and Carine were speakers at the last QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo in behalf of Elecraft. If you go on the QSO Today hamexpo.com website, you'll find the drop-down videos from the previous episodes, and if you put in HB9NBG in the search box, you'll actually find the videos that are up there. I'll also put links into Rene's YouTube channel so that you can see the hundreds of videos that are posted for SOTA activations and everything that Rene and Carine are doing. Rene, I want to thank you so much for coming on the QSO Today podcast and wish you 73.
Yeah, thanks very much to you, Eric. It was very, very nice. A big honor to have the opportunity. And by the way, we will be we will participate also to the next QSO Today party, and listeners can meet us on the desk from Elecraft once again.
That's right. You guys get to pull the midnight hours there for Elecraft, right? So when Wayne and Eric are sleeping, Rene and Carine will be manning the desk. So look for them at the Elecraft booth at the QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo. Thank you so much, Rene.
Thank you very much, Eric. Have a nice day. Have a nice time. Good decks on the bands.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope you enjoyed this QSO with Rene. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in HB9NBG in the search box at the top of the page. My thanks to ICOM America for its support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of ICOM America by clicking on their banner in the show notes pages. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any other episode into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes pages. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes pages, or use my Amazon link before shopping at Amazon. Amazon gives me a small commission on your purchases while at the same time protecting your privacy. I'm grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference as I head towards episode 400. QSO Today is now available in the iHeart, Radio, Spotify, YouTube, and a bunch of other online audio services, including the iTunes Store. Look on the right side of the show notes pages for a listing of these services. You can use the Amazon Echo and say, "Alicia, play the QSO Today podcast from TuneIn." My thanks to Ben Bresky, who edits every single show and allows both this host and my guest to sound brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Until next time, this is Eric, 4Z1UG, 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.